Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Byram Hills Board of Education meeting, March 22nd, 2016. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Please be seated. Just for the record, the meeting was called to order at 7 o'clock. We went into executive session to discuss item 3.1, which was a legal matter, individual student. And we are 2 board members short tonight. Alvin Burke and Michael Sanders could not be with us this evening. And the main purpose of our meeting tonight is going to be budget hearing 3. And in budget hearing 3, we'll open it up in a little while, a little bit later on. And we are going to hear about expenditures from the 3 areas of our administrators here: athletics, transportation, and operations and maintenance. And we're also going to hear about revenue. But before we go into our budget hearing 3, we are going to move to communications from the public, item number 4. And we do have people from the public that would like to address the board. Thank you both for coming. And what I am going to ask you to do is, when you're ready to speak, to rise and just look at the camera and state your name and your address, and then you can address your comments to me on behalf of the board. And after we've heard your comments, I'm going to ask Dr. Donahue, our superintendent, to give an overview of the issue and the background and address some of the concerns. Okay? Would you like to speak?
Sure. Scott Askin, 5 Crestview Drive, Pleasantville, New York.
I have an alibi.
Well, thank you for President Gladden, Dr. Donahue, and the board for meeting with us today. What we wanted to talk about, my wife Holly and I, are members of the Pleasantville community, and we've been talking to many of our community members regarding the busing, the conditions of the busing situation, out of our area in particular, but I think it's across the entire district. We have some concerns. Holly and I both have been members of the community since 2005. Served on many of the district volunteer committees. I was on the environmental education board for several years, and I was involved in many of the community school volunteer programs. So we're very familiar with many individuals on the board. So again, thank you. We have 3 children in the district. As we just spoke, 5th grader, a 3rd grader, and a 1st grader. So as our oldest child is now approaching the middle school, in talking to many of our fellow community members that are already in or have children in the middle school situation, there are several issues that we have considered. We've reached out to many of the fellow residents in Pleasantville. We have a petition that we put in front of the board that has approximately 80 signatures. It's an overwhelming number of the individuals that live in the Pleasantville area that are part of the school directory with children of grade level 7 and below. So clearly it's not all encompassing, but we wanted to really focus on our area first with really turning it over to the board to hopefully hear our concerns and do some additional work to address the broader community. I think one of the things that we're certainly quite aware of is certainly budgetary issues, both facing our district as it relates to taxes, state issues as it relates to budgets in general. So in thinking about all of this, we fully recognize that economics and money will ultimately be one of the key drivers, but we felt very certain that we should not put that in front of our children's best interests. We have 2 main concerns that we wanted to talk about. One, first and foremost, is 6th through 8th graders sharing busing with the high school children, both being in situations from a behavioral situation as well as language and other conditions that might be appropriate for high school age children, but perhaps not appropriate for middle school age children. We've spent time speaking with the transportation department and several others in the district. And most of the responses that we've gotten as well, there's cameras on the busing, safety is clearly at the top of our concern, and I fully recognize that, and we appreciate that. But what we do feel, and the community feels, is that there's many situations that cameras really fall as evidence or a use of the district to ultimately see the issues after they occur, not preventing the first one from happening. And then I think it really comes to the other issue that we've really been concerned about is the 6th through 8th graders that are being picked up roughly 30 minutes ahead of time or in earlier than they naturally would have if they were not sharing buses, getting to the middle school first versus the high school, and then sitting in generally in the cafeteria before the regular school day starts. And what we have concerns regarding is clearly at that age and as the kids get older, particularly into high school, is sleep is clearly something that every one of us, including me, and I'm sure everyone in this room would love more of. But when we think about the American Academy of Pediatrics and their concerns around high school age children and even middle school age children getting additional sleep, having children get up 30 minutes early just to sit in school and not have a active sort of schooling condition is something that really does concern us. And we would like for the district to look into other ways to potentially think about busing, other situations that could improve that condition. My brother and his family live on Long Island in the Jericho School District. They've changed their times of school, so it's more of a staggered condition where the high school is now the latest of the three schools to start, allowing for additional sleep as the children get older. Certainly that's one avenue to consider if the board so chooses. But what we really wanted to ask the board is to take this as a concern from the community and to do whatever work is necessary to identify the issues and see if there are other solutions that potentially could improve the busing conditions both in Pleasantville as well as the Pleasantville side of the district as well as the community at large. So we appreciate everyone's time and the petition I think goes through a little bit more detail on some of the things that I spoke about. I don't think it's necessary to repeat everything that's in there, but certainly appreciate that and happy for any questions.
Thank you very much. Mike, did you want to speak as well?
No, I don't.
Okay. Thank you for addressing the board, and thank you for the petition that you circulated, and each of the board members did receive that petition. Appreciate that. And now I'm going to turn to Dr. Donahue.
Yep.
Well, actually, first, let me just summarize and make sure that we've got all the points set. Make sure that I heard you right. Your main area of concern is the Pleasantville side, although it could affect the other areas of the district as well. And it's the combination of the high school mixed with the middle schoolers. Developmentally, they're at different stages, so a concern about having the younger kids exposed to the older kids. And also, of course, the length of the bus ride and how early it is, the kids getting to school early to accommodate these kids that have to get to the high school for an earlier start. They pretty much hit on main points? Okay. Bill, would you be able to give us some background on transportation and maybe address some of these?
Sure. And board members, you all always ask me questions when you have them, but it was a lot of content, so if there's something that's in your head, be sure to ask me if I miss it. I guess to give some context, our busing policy, and this is not by any means the final answer, but I think it'll give some context. Our busing policy is designed to meet the state law. And state law's school busing policy is really only about one value. It's not about anybody's health, wealth, convenience, the environment, any of those things. It's about state law requires students by law to go to school, so they require school districts to provide transportation. State law actually gives up to an hour and a half. Our current policy gives 45 minutes, that no student should be on a bus for 45 minutes.
At the most.
At the most. It doesn't address when they should get there, so I'll try to do some of those things when I talk too. Our current bus practices, I think is a better way to put it than policy, are mainly driven by efficiency. The transportation budget is almost 5% of our total district budget, so watching those costs is important. Buses themselves are expensive, but maintaining them according to state law. All buses have to be inspected twice a year. You can't, and every bus before it's inspected has to go through a big inspection by us because we can't afford to have a bus fail when we pulled out of service. So there's quite a few attached costs, not the least of which is drivers, whose salaries are not exorbitant, but drivers are civil service employees and union employees, so they also get insurance costs, and we're required to pay into the state pension for them. That's actually more than their salary. Those two benefits are more than their salaries. And some of those benefits go on forever. So we try to take all those costs into account when we do this. And they're all, those don't address your questions directly by any means, but they're the kind of things communities have in their mind these days, unions and pensions and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting. First thing we did when we got the study was take a look at what would it cost to separate the middle school and the high school, just that, and what would be the impact. So we couldn't do it, I don't think, fairly for just one community. We'd have to do it for the entire district. So we estimate for the entire district we'd need to buy 2 big buses, full-size buses. They're about $150,000 each, so that would be $300,000 initial investment. And we'd also need 6 vans. They're about, well, altogether they're $312,000. I think they're about $52,000 for a van. Then we would need a minimum of, well, for 8 vehicles, we need a minimum of 8 drivers, but there's an industry standard for how many extra drivers you should have on hand, not just available, but actually in the yard. So the max would be 12. That would range somewhere between a cost of about $480,000 to $680,000 a year, depending on if we went with the minimum number. We really couldn't go with the minimum number. So it'd be around $500,000 to $700,000 a year. And those costs would be permanent. So the difficulty, you mentioned budgets, with the tax cap, that amount alone would exceed the tax cap next year. Our tax cap, we're allowed to increase our taxables by $333,000 roughly. So that's about $1.1 million. And so that would be a very difficult move to make. I also wonder, to be honest with you, if we did that and we did the same runs, if they'd be any faster, because it seems to me we just have 2 buses pulling up to the same stop, maybe fewer kids getting on each bus, but then they'd gradually work their way in. So I'm not sure that for that $1 million we'd get much more than maybe 10 minutes. I did take a look at, so that's going to be hard for me to recommend at that cost. I did take a look at, where kids are actually coming in terms of time. Our first pickup in Pleasantville anyway is 6:45 right now, and classes start at Crittenden at 7:45. So in terms of our efficiencies, it's tough to beat an hour. If we separated them, I wonder if we could save 10 minutes. It'd be hard to say 10 minutes is worth that kind of money. Currently, the 3 buses are at 6:45, 6:47, and 6:53. And I guess part of what I should explain here is the way we've kept our costs in line is all of our drivers do either a double run or a triple run. None of our drivers, or virtually none of our drivers, do single runs. So that means, and this is just for sort of full knowledge, one of the reasons they're getting to the schools early is they've got to get back out and do an elementary run after that. So the real efficiency would be if we could do single runs and you either ran an elementary or a secondary, but that would increase the budget by literally 1/3 to 1/2. I mean, that's really exorbitant. So I have a couple of recommendations. In terms of the school hours, we took a look at changing times a little bit earlier this year in the schools we compared ourselves to either didn't have big transportation, or they in changing their time, the only school in Westchester that did this,
That's very right.
right, they decreased their instructional time along with it, which would be very difficult for me to recommend given our district's achievement.
Or they didn't have busing.
Orientation, or they didn't have busing, right. Frequently when this is talked about, everybody points at the high school. I think if we said to our high school, you could start a half hour later and go a half hour later, they would kill us, the kids and the parents. Because it's usually other families that are saying this, if you move the high school back, it'll be a perfect solution. And high school kids in this district, beginning at 2:30, are booked till 8:30. So if you tell me I'm going till 3:30, I'm not getting home till 9:30. That is not, I can't say we've done an in-depth study of start times. It's extremely complicated, because it would also mean renegotiating all of our contracts, because start times are in our contracts. And I'm not averse to doing that, but I'm averse to, when you ask somebody to give something up in a union, you have to give them something. So it would cost us something. The two recommendations I have is, we met with the transportation director, and she suggested that what the petition caused us to do, we have never done before, which is after the beginning of the school year. In the beginning of the school year, we put out the bus schedule. I mean, you know how that works. Sometimes there's some tinkering. Sometimes there's something really wrong, you know, like a stop is in the wrong place, or a route needs to be changed in a minor way, but it's really tinkering. What we did was we took a look at where those routes are now, and we've already discovered all of them could be 10 minutes later without any real impact. And the reason we discovered this is the petition caused us to reassess everything. We've never done that before after like the first week of school, the second week of school.
Was this just in the Pleasantville area? Did you say?
Well, we just looked at the Pleasantville area. The 3 buses that do the Pleasantville area could each come 10 minutes later. And the one that goes to the high school first, we're not sure it could go to the middle school first, but we could experiment with that. But this kind of reassessment, I think, would be smart for us to do around October 1st, October 15, do it again in December or January, because the factors change a lot. For instance, in the spring, I believe 1/3 of the high school is involved in interscholastic athletics in the spring. There's nobody on the buses. In the winter, the numbers are at the lowest. Fall sports is also very high. But it takes a while for that to shake out. If you drive on Route 22 toward the high school on September 10th versus December 10th, the difference in traffic is dramatic, but nothing's changed. If anything, more kids are driving. So I think that kind of reassessment we should do. The second thing I was going to suggest, and I didn't, this is off the cuff, so Jen Lamia, who works with HR and was helpful with this, and Cheryl, who is transportation, was helpful with this. I didn't talk to them about this. But I wonder if once we do routes, if we hire a consultant to review, you know, somebody with a fresh look, maybe somebody who's done this elsewhere. Cheryl's going to be retired, maybe have heard that. She's not going to want to come back. But I wonder if, you know, when I used to build the high school schedule, when I was the guidance director there and then the high school principal, it was very helpful to have somebody else come in and look at the problems afterwards. So, you know, typically what we would do is we would build the schedule. At the end, there are 5 kids who want to get into AP Physics who aren't getting in, 3 who want to get into AP English who aren't getting in. What I would do is have somebody with a very analytic mind come in and take a look. Here's my problems. See if you can find a theme. I would certainly be willing to recommend that. It would be really hard for me to recommend spending $1 million in this budget with a, I mean, if we have a $333,000 increase in the budget, we'd have to come up with $750,000, which is like 6 teachers. And I don't even think that's, I mean, that's all a rhetorical question. I wouldn't even go there.
But Bill,
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
to be clear, that reassessment that you're able to do and the 10 minutes that you're able to shave now, we might have to take that back in the fall because
For the first few
circumstances are different. A lot more people are riding the bus. We're obligated to have a seat for the people that are riding. So,
Yeah, I think the first reassessment we could do would be around October, Cheryl suggested October 10, something like that.
But you did say that you might be able to do something now for the rest of the year, is that correct?
Well, I think for the rest of the year, we want to fix, yeah, if we discover that we don't need 10 minutes, we should do it.
So, Dr. Donahue, a couple things on busing times. So, and I believe, so we said is the earliest pickup is roughly 6:50.
6:45.
6:45 for a 7:50 start.
first 7.
Well, they're supposed to be in class at 6:45.
Okay, so 7:45, 7 and
Yeah.
6:45. So it's
And
an
we
hour-
really
it's an
ideally,
hour bus.
we think the ideal time to get to Crittenden is 7:30. So kids have time to do a little socializing, they have to go to their locker. First
Right.
bell's at 7:45, so we'd like them to be in their class at first bell, not
Sure.
last bell.
So right now, our bus picks up for Wampus at 6:50 and with a start time of 8:20.
And that's the final bell.
Right, so that's a 30-minute differential between. for
So
the
they're
same
pushing to
campus.
get there on time.
For the same campus. Right. So I think the 10 minutes that you suggested is probably very light if there was an extra bus going to pick up in our area. Right, because if it's 30-minute differential between those two buses that are going to the same spot already, that seems like
I'd have to look at.
something to at least examine in terms of the numbers. Two other things that just thinking as you
Yeah.
we're talking, class sizes in general, from where we are today versus where we're headed in the district seem to be on the decline. I'm wondering if that frees up any buses going forward.
Oh, I think it does
to-
going forward.
To consider in this whole, opportunity that we really would like for the board to consider.
Yeah, one of the reasons I wouldn't want to spend $1 million next year, to be honest with you, is I'd be afraid that in a year, the numbers at Crittenden are just starting to, we just
Sure.
had the first big class hit there, so we'll have another one next year, another one the year after that.
But I mean, those numbers they change around a little bit per year, but I think that's.
No, they don't change.
We could,
We know where they're going.
right, we know where they're gonna be, so I'm assuming.
All that's going
that
to
evaluation can be
facilitate
done
speed.
today
Yeah,
for looking forward to the next 10 years.
absolutely. And I didn't offer that, but yeah, that was in the back of my mind. I'm reluctant to make a dramatic change if it's going to solve itself to some extent, because that will have an impact. The place it'll have the least impact for the place it'll take the longest to hit is the high school, of course, but they're the lightest users.
And then the other thing that, we've struggled with this year, last year, and we've had the opportunity to speak with Cheryl and I've spoken with Greg as well, is the loop that the different bus drivers do. So our area seems to be one of the longer loops in general to the different schools. And it's the same bus drivers that do the longest loops. Therefore, they get to the schools the latest, picking up the school kids coming home the latest, therefore getting home even later than they naturally would.
Oh, so
just
within
in
their
terms
own,
of time.
within a driver's own schedule.
Yeah, so.
We could look at it, yeah.
So something, I think part of this whole evaluation,
So if somebody who has a long follows with a short, there's less pressure on them to get right back out.
Absolutely.
Could look at it. It's really complicated. This
Sure.
reminds me of conversations I used to have with parents who, the kid couldn't get into AP French. They'd say, well, maybe you could move his English. And I would say, I've already tried moving his English, his social studies. And this also could be where a consultant is helpful. Somebody who's solved this someplace else might see something that other people don't see.
But I would also hate for the cost of a consultant to get in the way of an extra bus.
Well, that may be something that.
That wouldn't be anywhere near a factor. I mean, they're not going to come near $52,000. They could come in for a couple of days and review the schedule.
No concern, we're gonna hire some guy.
Bill, one quick question for you on the middle school, high school sharing a bus issue. I guess over the course of time, has there been any like real patterns of disciplinary issues or problems that have arisen?
No, I
with
checked
that
into it,
combination?
and I think there's two levels here of behavior. I forget who told me this. Robin actually was helpful with understanding this. I, of course, went immediately to discipline records. There are almost none. I think there was one incident between a high school and middle school kid on a bus this year, and last year there were two, and then I stopped going because that's not there. But then there's just the conversation stuff. They
Right.
hear,
Right.
I mean, what they hear is probably no worse than they hear on television,
Yeah.
but it's conversational.
Right, but that's at least a choice they have, and the parents have to allow them to do that.
Right.
On the bus, there's no choice.
There's, yeah,
Yeah.
in terms of what the conversation is.
Yeah. So, we heard you, and I do appreciate this, so it sounds
So
like
there's a
our
couple
next
things we
steps
can
would-
follow up with. I think for the immediate parents, you did a nice thing, if we can get 10 minutes off it now.
It will be
We can certainly look at
communicated to all of them.
reorganizing, and then I think some things like these loop ideas, and there are probably ideas that are much more relevant to a bus schedule expert, but they would know what to look at. I'd certainly be willing to do that.
Do you look at load factors every September? Is that, or it's during the summer? Is that when you do that analysis? Because I mean, that's always a way to save money if you can.
Well, I think the other part of reassessing is to reassess load factors, because the load factors are based on the first day of school and they change dramatically. And I'm not sure that that is helping any.
Yeah, I mean, we have heard that there are buses that are virtually empty, and buses that have kids standing.
Yeah, I don't think there are kids standing. I heard that, and I recently watched some
We've heard that
tapes.
from many.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I heard about a bus where kids were standing and sitting in the aisles. I looked at the tape, the bus holds 72 kids, there were 55 kids on it. And the empty buses I usually get from people who don't realize that a bus one way is always empty.
They'll see a bus driving by.
You know what I mean? They'll see a bus driving by, but it's on its way to its first pickup or it's just dropped off.
Our director of transportation is doing an incredibly good job of just,
She does, but we keep it really tight. It's hard.
Of emptying the buses.
It's hard.
Well, I know, should I?
No, you're okay.
There are parents from our community, I'm assuming others also, that are already arranging carpools for their children to be driven to Crittenden. And their children are 2 years away from Crittenden. So it's not even like they're planning
Yeah.
for next year, they're planning for the
You
year
know-
after.
And also, people also looking into private transportation, so.
And would that be an
hiring private buses.
option?
Well,
To what?
an option?
There are a lot of people thinking about hiring a private bus.
Private van
Yeah,
service?
private van
Yeah.
service, take kids from the area to schools.
You know, our main goal with transportation is getting our kids to school and getting them there safely. And hoping that it's not.
I mean, the ideal
that
thing
long.
is just-in-time arrival, but with public
Yeah.
transportation, that's just really hard to do.
Listen, I think everyone understands that, everyone's realistic and
Yeah.
and the benefits of obviously public transportation, but 30 minutes is, I
Yeah.
think, far too much time to get you a lot.
Well, I mean, arguably, if you feel that, yeah, you can go in another direction. I'm not sure any outside vehicles are allowed in our actual bus lanes.
Right.
I'd have to find out. Like at the middle school and the high school, they're dedicated bus lanes that no one else is allowed in. I don't think
They
we'd
would-
allow a private bus in those.
They would just have to go in where
The
the
cars.
drop off, yeah.
The car drop-off, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had kids that have gone through the whole thing. I kind of live on one end of the town. I'm on, close to Bedford. And, my kids are now in high school, but I've had that, the long ride and all that too. And the middle school kids getting on the bus with the older kids and everything. And, I mean, it is, it is a little scary and stuff, but they're luckily, they've survived. It's been okay. But it is nice having the option of having the bus. But sometimes it is a little bit longer of a ride.
Well, I think, thank you for coming and expressing your concerns in the calm and objective way you did. It's,
Oh, you've always been great.
really,
Both of you.
no, I mean, I really don't know you. Others do. I'm a little too old to know everybody anymore. But, this is also gives the board a little more insight into what's happening to an extent, because our kids, some of them are in schools and some of them haven't been in schools for many years. And a concern if this comes up from parents, we take it seriously. We don't think you'd be here to waste your time or our time. And transportation is always a hot button issue with parents. And thank goodness we have a superintendent and a director of transportation, each who really take pride in what they do, and also have to balance the, I would say, justifiable concerns of parents against the management concerns of a school district, which isn't always easy, it always doesn't end up in what everybody wants, but rest assured your concerns will be heard and addressed properly. In addition, not only beyond tonight, which I thought they were addressed very well by the superintendent, frankly, on short notice. But thank you, it's really helpful. To me, speaking as one board member, I found your presentation very helpful.
Yeah, and I appreciate it too, and I'm from the far corner of Bedford with a sixth grader, so the issues that you say resonate, because I understand exactly where you're coming from. It's all a matter of trying to balance with all these other issues that we have as a school, but if nothing else, it should always be focused on and thought about as it has been, but we need to continue to focus on transportation and logistics around it, just to try to maximize to the extent that we can.
So are there any other avenues as it relates to this budget, as it relates to a community or a district-wide group on
We would
additional
need,
dollars that can be used?
Yeah, we would need an override. We would need a 2/3 majority.
Two-thirds majority of
Of the
Voting,
entire.
of the entire voting.
In other words, we would put up our budget and it would need to pass by 2/3
Right,
majority.
we need 1 vote over 50%
Now.
to pass, and 60% to pass something beyond the tax levy cap, which is
on average, how does the?
Last year, we would have been over that, but once you do a budget override, you have to inform the community that you are.
It tends to,
And about 95% of the budget override
That's right.
votes fail.
Statewide so far.
Sure.
Nobody's got much of a stomach for going over the tax cap.
Understood.
And you have in other venues heard me say this before about the number of people here who vote, and the number of parents who vote always kind of astounds me.
It's pretty awful.
Of the 76 who signed your petition, less than a third. I checked.
yeah.
Less than a third. So that's a very risky approach.
Okay.
Thank
Again,
you.
thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
your time
Thanks,
and
guys.
consideration.
Now you have to stay
But
for the rest of the
Yeah,
meeting.
but it does sound like the 10 minutes is
All
going
right.
to happen in the meantime, right?
Yep.
So the 10 minutes, well, at least
But
that's
that
a
won't
start.
affect them. They're looking
We'll let
at
them go
next
10
year.
minutes early, Ira.
That's true. Thank you very much for
Thank
coming,
you.
and thank you
Thank you
for
for
your,
coming.
like I said, giving us the petition in advance. It was very helpful. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And you're more than welcome to stay, but if you choose not to, we won't be offended.
Well,
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.
Get the little ones to bed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was very nice to meet you.
nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Donahue, for
Sure.
giving us that overview. Okay. Can I have a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, and can I have a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda for personnel, special services, and business?
So moved.
In a second? All in favor? Okay.